all your stuff. What can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Purple shirt in effect.
It is happening. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Claire.
I am wearing the purple shirt. That is all. And podcast. I told everybody we'd had this water problem, which was that it was not water, but mud coming out of our everything. Taps.
Mud tap.
Yeah, mud tap. It is better now, but it's better in a stopgap way. And I just have trouble trusting that it will be resolved. You know what I mean? So then, okay, look, cottage core, prairie core, farm core, all the cores.
It's not Instagram, though. That stuff is fully, it's just highlights. It's just the pretty seeds on the evening sunbeam. It is not mud in the taps for the most part.
Yeah, look, y'all, this isn't easy. I've made my choices, right? And I could have much bigger problems, but I just want everybody to know that it's not pretty. So now we've had a bunch of rain and our driveway's a mess. You just can't get in or out of the property. And that's just, we have a 1/4 mile long driveway, and that's just reality. This is why when I do the right tool for the job episode, I say, get yourself some good boots.
Yeah, she knows what she's talking about, everybody.
What I have been doing is posting a lot of beauty to Instagram, but it is very much the idealized version of things. But it's for me. I need to reconnect with the beauty and the reason why I'm out here. And taking those photographs helps me gain perspective. I think I brought this up in another, I think in the last smidgen we released. But it's not all pretty. So just know that, everyone. Know that I suffer, everyone. Know that. Just keep that in mind.
No, happy, relaxed vacation story starts with, look, I've made my choices. And I stand by them. That's not the start of an easygoing kind of tale.
No.
Oh, it makes me it doesn't make me happy that you're suffering. You make me happy. That's really it.
It makes you happy that I'm funny in my suffering.
Yeah.
Which is how I always feel about you.
Yeah.
And I have a couple other friends like that. Like a friend of the podcast, Sandra, is like that. She is so funny when she's pissed off. I love her recounting stories where she's angry. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I know you're in it right now, but you are so cute. You were making me laugh. I mean, at the very least, we can provide entertainment for our neighbors.
At the very least, is the relationships we have with real people in proximity to us in real life can be amused by how we process our anger, disappointment, and mud tappery. Yeah.
Our choices.
Our choices. I am sorry to hear that. You sent me, speaking of your Instagram, photographic voice, we don't call it that. People who know photography call it something else. Your perspective. You sent me the most beautiful photo of Sage, your wonderful dog, sniffing/nibbling a flower, an orange flower. Looks like a geranium?
It was a marigold.
Marigold. You sent a text with it that said, don't worry, she didn't eat it.
Yeah.
And that should just be, that's perfect. It was perfect. I really needed it that morning. I was like, oh, thank God.
I'm glad it made you happy. It's funny because I felt like I had to explain that to people, that I wasn't just letting her eat random plants. But you know, because you know dogs, they experience things, yes, with their nose, but with their mouth. So she did put her mouth on it, but she did not consume it.
That's how they learn about things. They're like babies. That's why babies put everything in their mouth. Tell me about this texture. Tell me about this shape.
She is pretty wonderful in the garden, I have to say. She sniffs flowers. She just puts her nose on all the flowers. She loves fresh peas from the garden. I've sort of created a monster because I do not feed her people food. She gets peanut butter with pills, and she gets fresh peas from the garden. But now when she sees me eat something in the garden, she's sure it's got to be delicious. So I was eating a strawberry the other day. And she was like, oh, I see that color. Let me see. Oh, here it is. And she went for it. I was like, this isn't a buffet.
Well, especially strawberries, so hard to grow in your climate, require so much care and attention. I'm sorry, Sage. They're not for you.
I did think it was pretty cute.
She's very photogenic, your dog. Not all dogs are.
Yeah. She's just down. I mean, that's what I love about dogs. They're just down to do whatever it is you want to do.
What's next? Let's do that. That sounds fun.
Are we lounging? Okay, cool. Nap time? Awesome. Oh, we're going to go dig in the garden? Great, I'll help you.
That's it. I mean, they're really companions. These guys, I just took them on a walk, so they're both tired, and we might be treated to some of Murphy's old man post-walk as he catches his breath for an hour. But yeah, they're just like, oh, great, let's go for a walk. And I was like, it's kind of hot, you guys, and I got to be back for podcast, so we're going to go home now. They're like, great. We got inside. They're like, oh my gosh, inside is so great. Look, there's water over here. Oh my gosh, I'm going to take a nap.
It must be so fun to walk two dogs at once.
I often walk them separately, not because they don't get along, but because walks are a sort of training opportunity for them. And I don't have the ability at the moment, the mental focus. I don't have the capacity to train two dogs at once on leash. I just can't do it.
I bet that's hard.
It's hard if I was at full battery.
Yeah.
But I'm living life at 40% right now.
Do they get the same walk?
I vary it a little for my own sanity.
Do you ever feel guilty like you're giving one dog a better walk? Like this is the cooler walk?
No, because they sniff the entire time we're gone. And so they like changing it up too, because they get to sniff different things and pee on different things. My God, they both pee. It's stunning to me. They'll pee when they have no pee. And this is just a dog thing. This is not unique to them. But they'll lift a leg on things long after they have exhausted their supply. And I find that very funny. I'm like, what are you doing? You're just like bumping your penis against that tree right now. There's nothing happening.
Hey, tree, you've just been donged.
It's not even about, I don't know if it's about ownership. And I don't know if this is true. Somebody who studies dog behavior probably does. The story I tell myself to keep myself entertained as we're doing these things is that they like to sniff before they pee. And it's because they're reading all the things that have happened before, formulating a response, and then in their pee is the response. It's like you have to read the chat before you contribute to it. Otherwise, you're just a jerk.
I was thinking about this the other day. Okay. I will acknowledge this is going to sound like a left turn, but have you ever seen the 80s movie Vibes, starring Jeff Goldblum and Cyndi Lauper as psychics?
Oh my God. It was on HBO, but I never saw it.
Jeff Goldblum's psychic skill is that he can touch objects and know the full story, who's held them, what they've done with it.
What a great skill.
It is, but it's also really scary. Like in the spoiler alert for the movie Vibes, he holds his girlfriend's panties and realizes that someone else has been holding these panties. He picks up a knife and realizes someone was murdered with it. Like, and he sees it all in his mind. Anyway, dogs are like that. In that they walk up to the tree and they're like, there was a chihuahua here an hour ago.
And that chihuahua's owner had Doritos last night and did not give the chihuahua any. And that is a point of contention in their relationship.
Yep. The way that they're processing story in such a different way than we do is so cool. Dogs are like Jeff Goldblum in the 1988 film Vibes. I was just going to talk about how delightful Cyndi Lauper is.
Cyndi Lauper is delightful. And also, the Girls Just Want to Have Fun video is so much fun to watch. It was earlier. You can Google it if you want. Sometime in the 80s, she made a video for the lovely song Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And it's a multicultural video. It looks like somebody who's trying to be woke now made it. And she just did that because she's representing New York, which is and was multicultural. I was like, just good for her. She's great. Also, and this is crazy, and this is totally an aside. I don't know how we started talking about the career of Cyndi Lauper, but I'm going to go with it because I love her so much. She was really good in Bones, which is not like a top TV series that I watch. I have a lot of issues. It's not my favorite. Let's just put it that way. It's not my favorite show. But she was in that for a sort of a 4 or 5 episode arc, and she was really good.
I now want to watch Bones, which I have never said before in my life, so... I'm just going to watch her arc. Like, I watch Bones for Cyndi Lauper. I mean.
You don't need to watch the whole thing. You can just pick out her arc and watch it and be totally fine. Anyway, enough randomly dissing defunct TV shows.
This really went somewhere. I feel like we've been on a journey.
We've definitely covered some very important territory. I feel good about it.
Hey everyone, this is the podcast It Chooses You.
That's Claire Patton.
That's Teresa Sparks.
We talk about things we enjoy. Claire has described this recently as our love letters to the world, and that is true. And also, we talk about stories that have been meaningful to us and that have impacted us in some way. Shifted the direction of our lives, in some sense.
And we hope they do the same for you.
Yeah, that's right. We're here to make you change. It's a little aggressive. It's true.
You just sounded like everyone's mom just then.
Be a different person. So if you like this or other episodes, please like, comment, rate, subscribe. Download is most important. Please download our episodes because it helps us spread the word. So today, I'm going to tell you a couple stories that have someone in common. And I think I'm going to leave it at that for now. We're just going to dive in.
Just trust us, everyone.
Just trust me. Ooh, pressure's on me. But you shared it. Thanks. You're the best. So in 1917, 9-year-old Frances Griffiths and her mother, who had just arrived in the UK from South Africa, were staying with Frances's aunt and her aunt's daughter, Elsie, in the village of Cottingley in West Yorkshire. Elsie was 16. As you might expect, a 9-year-old Frances and a 16-year-old Elsie don't have a lot in common. They're hanging out a lot together. But if you've ever been 16 with a 9-year-old cousin, it's like, for God's sake, like, do I have to?
And there was not even any malls back then.
No malls, no television, no radio, no media of any kind.
And the driving age was like 42 back then.
Driving age was 42 and no one had a car. Nowhere to go except your house or your lawn. And maybe you could walk to town or walk to the village, I guess. So they're spending time together, mostly in the creek behind their house, called a beck, apparently, in Yorkshire. So there's a creek at the bottom of their lawn. Essentially, their backyard ends in a creek. Coming from West Virginia, this is a very familiar organization of a house. Basically, like, they're whiling away the days, playing in the creek behind their house, and their mothers are becoming increasingly annoyed because they come back wet and dirty. And that's the bane of mothers everywhere, especially in 1917, where laundry is a fucking process. You don't drop it in the machine and go. You have to be intimately involved with it or pay to send it out. Laundry is an issue. That's all I'm saying. And these girls are causing laundry. That's their cardinal sin.
This is why we don't let kids go outside anymore. Laundry.
100%. After what I assume is weeks and weeks of being chastised for the state of their socks, which is like every teenager's dream, Frances and Elsie said, "We're only going out there to see the fairies," which was met with appropriate consternation from all of the adults involved. So to prove it, they're like, "No, we see fairies. Dad, give me your camera," Elsie says.
"Let me take it to the mud."
Yeah, let me take a very expensive piece of delicate equipment out to the stream.
For 3 hours, because that's how long it took to take one photograph.
The girls took the camera back there and came back 30 minutes and or 3 hours later, triumphant. Ha ha! So Elsie's father, Arthur, was a photographer, and he had a darkroom in the house. And he developed the picture. So the picture on the plate he developed showed Frances, the little one, behind a bush, and bushes in the foreground, and on the bush, 4 fairies appeared to be dancing. He's a photographer. He's got a darkroom in his house at a time when not everybody has that. He looked at him and he's like, "Yeah, those look like cardboard cutouts. The fuck?" 2 months later, after further chastisement for the state of their socks, they borrowed his camera again. And this time they came back with a picture of Elsie, the older one, sitting on the lawn holding out her hand to a 1-foot-tall gnome. And their dad at this point was like, "Cut the shit." Why are you messing with my very expensive camera? Also, I didn't give you permission to borrow it this time. What is wrong with you? But his wife is like, "I don't know, Arthur. These look real to me." Okay, so mom's on board. And mom is the one doing the laundry. So she's the one they had to convince anyway. So in the first photograph, Frances is like staring to the right of the camera, definitely not looking at the cardboard figures capering on the grass. I'm totally giving away the ending by calling them cardboard, by the way. Spoilers, right? And in the second one, Elsie is leaning forward to shake the hand of the gnome. In 1919, Polly attended a meeting of the Theosophical Society in Bradford, which I guess is in Yorkshire. And the lecture that evening was on fairy life, which means something different then than it would now. It would be much more interesting now. At the end of the meeting, she showed the speaker the 2 fairy photographs that her daughter and her niece had taken. And the speaker was like, "Oh my gosh, proof." And he took the photographs to be displayed at the Society's annual conference in Harrogate, which was a few months after that. So like within the span of about 4 months, these girls had proven the existence of fairies to a national society of relatively educated and intelligent people who then like took the story and ran with it. The photos came to the attention of who's called a leading member of the society, Edward Gardner. One of the central tenets of theosophy is that humanity is undergoing a cycle of evolution, which is like not only theosophy, that's also Darwinism and current science. But they sort of saw human evolution in different terms. It's not like we were becoming slightly better in some ways, or like thumbs were getting a little longer. It's like, no, next we're going to be fairies, you guys. Gardner's traveling with these photographs, giving lectures, etc. But he's getting a lot of questions. as you might expect from people who are like, yeah, but fairies aren't real. What? So he sent them to a photographer, Harold Snelling. He sent the negatives and the original plates. And Snelling was a photography expert. And his opinion, when the results are in, he says the 2 negatives are entirely genuine, unfaked photographs with no trace whatsoever of studio work involving cards or paper models. Now, he didn't say the photographs showed fairies. What he said was, these are straightforward photographs of whatever was in front of the camera at the time.
Right. These photographs don't show not fairies.
Looking at them now, and these photos are all available online. You guys should go check them out ever so briefly. But Rosa Lister, who wrote a great article about this situation for Quartz online, she says both photographs seem immediately identifiable as fakes. Like, the figures are obviously propped up and two-dimensional. Everything, including the expressions on both girls' faces, looks staged. It's really hard to imagine the photos seeming convincing to anyone older than 12. And when you look at them, it's like, yeah, those are clearly fakes. Like, what are you talking about? The shadows are different. It's just hilarious. But never underestimate a group of people who really want to believe something. We can convince ourselves of a whole lot.
Yep.
Rosa Lister in that article goes on to say that the story of the Cottingley fairies, as they came to be called, has always fascinated her, not because, the particulars are that interesting, but because of what it reveals about the life cycle of a lie, which is a theme we touch on again and again. Like, why do people lie to themselves? Why do we lie to each other? What do you do when you've told a lie that you regret? In contrast to other famous hoaxes, she says it doesn't seem malicious or even deliberate. It's like these kids were playing, and then adults are like, oh, fairies are real. And the kids are kind of left thinking, what the fuck? What? Okay, and now we're just in it. Now we just have to go along with it. Because mom is going to be really mad about the laundry if we tell her that we lied about the fairies. To Rosa Lister, it seems like it's a story about how a single, relatively small act of deception can lead a large group of people to lose control over the truth.
There's something about it being a child's lie shifted into the arena of adult life that becomes a bit silly, right? So there's a big difference between a child believing a lie, or I don't even know if I'd call it a lie. It's an act of faith and imagination. And that being taken seriously by adults is kind of the weird thing about it.
So the initial press coverage was skeptical, and one editorial noted that the photographs could be explained not by a knowledge of occult phenomena, but by a knowledge of children. Like during and after World War I, spiritualism and mysticism were popular. Theosophical Society, to my knowledge, is not still in effect. It was a time of that kind of exploration. People want to believe there's a better world. If you or someone you love has experienced the Battle of the Somme, you want to believe that there is a better world than this. Guess who now pops in to the story with his pith helmet, poking his head around the doorframe to say hello? It's Arthur Conan Doyle.
If it's weird, he was at the center of it. I'm telling you all. Come on.
This guy was a fucking freak. And I love the contrast of the very logical, super observant, very intelligent Sherlock Holmes with the guy who created him, who looked at these photos and thought, yes, fairies are real. So Arthur Conan Doyle, friend of the podcast, was born in 1859 and died in 1930. We know he's a writer, very famous writer. He was also a physician. He was an ophthalmologist. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I find that particularly interesting, that his branch of medicine had to do with eyesight and how we see and what we see.
And he thought, what I'm seeing in these photos is some fucking fairies.
You talked about the Mary Celeste a few episodes ago in Mysterious Disappearances. In Mysterious Disappearances, you also talked about Agatha Christie, and Conan Doyle was involved in the 10 days of Agatha Christie's life where she was nowhere. He also wrote a story in 1884 that actually popularized the mystery of the Mary Celeste. So he's all... You might have said that. I'm sorry.
No, I did. Yeah, it's fine. If you guys want to hear me say it, then go back and listen to that episode.
But if you're happy to just hear me say it and pretend that I originated it, you can just stay here for a minute. If you want to respect Claire, go listen to that episode.
You have to choose.
That's funny if this podcast just devolves into a popularity contest.
Yeah.
Whew, brutal. Brutal.
Okay, who do you like better?
We're going to put a poll up on our website. You just tell us who you like better. So, Sir, can you believe it? Sir Arthur Conan Doyle learned of these photographs from the editor of the spiritualist publication Light. He had been commissioned by the Strand magazine, which was a popular periodical of the day, to write an article on fairies for their Christmas issue. So like I said, like fairies were in the popular consciousness. There's a broadcaster called Magnus Magnuson who said the fairy photographs must have seemed like a godsend. Because how are you going to write an article on fairies? Oh, thank God, there are pictures of fairies that are now circulating. Phew, that was a close one.
Let me show you my lithograph of Bigfoot.
So Doyle contacted Gardner from the Theosophical Society in June of 1920 to get what's the background on these photographs? Who are these people? And from that conversation, he then wrote to Elsie and her father. I guess it's because Elsie's the older one, and if he had written to a 9-year-old girl, it would have been weird. So he wrote to the older one, thank God, to request permission to use prints of the photographs in this article he was writing. And Arthur Wright, the dad, was really impressed that Doyle was involved, because at that point he was a very famous writer and everyone knew who he was. And he gave his permission for publication, obviously. But he refused payment because he said if the photos are genuine, then they shouldn't be soiled by money. Which I think is actually very sweet, given that, just guess whether or not all of the people who made money off of these photographs immediately after, did they agree? No. They were selling them at lectures to raise money. These people made merch of these photographs. The dad was like, no, it's a precious thing if it's real. The first and most virulent skeptic is the one who says, no, we shouldn't take money because if they're real, I find that very sweet. Gardner and Doyle teamed up at this point and got a second expert opinion. They contacted Kodak, and a few others. And almost all of the companies said, yeah, these aren't real. But the language that they used to return their verdict wasn't anything to do with the photographs technically. They didn't note anything in the way the photographs were taken or processed that led them to believe that. They just didn't believe in fairies, and so they thought they weren't real. Now, of course they didn't believe in fairies. But I understand why Gardner and Doyle continued to seek out third, fourth, fifth opinions. They want it to be true, and if your only objection to the photos is that fairies aren't real, well, we think fairies are real. So, neener, we're looking for something else, One reviewer, Sir Oliver Lodge, who was a psychical researcher, he believed they were fake, though. And he suggested that a troupe of dancers had masqueraded as fairies because they had distinctly Parisian hairstyles. Uh-huh. He's like, I've seen those spit curls before. That's not a fairy. Gardner thought the Wright family was honest and respectable. He went back to their house at the end of July of 1920, I think. So they're like, okay, we need to take photos with our equipment, not just their camera. We're going to change out the camera and see if we can get photos.
Show us these fairies.
They brought 2 cameras with 24 secretly marked photographic plates. Frances, the younger one, was invited to stay with the Wright family during the school summer holiday so that she and Elsie could take more pictures of the fairies. He described this excursion essentially in a book he wrote, A Book of Real Fairies. I went off to Cottingley again, taking the 2 cameras and plates from London, met the family, and explained to the 2 girls the simple working of the camera, giving one each to keep. So at this point, they're getting presents. They're like, ooh, we now have cameras. They loaded the cameras and sent them out to the garden. And they said, no, the fairies won't come out if anyone else is here.
Of course, right.
So GTFO, we'll take photos. Half an hour later, they came back and they're like, yeah, we got some more. Life is great. At this point, their father, I think at this point, he told them, he's like, look, I thought they were fake too. But I searched their room for anything like the remnants of cutouts or anything that they might have used to make them, and I couldn't find anything. And I also went down to the stream to see if there was anything down there, and I couldn't find any incriminating evidence.
No rogue fairy arms or wings.
Also, don't forget, female clothing didn't have pockets at this point, so they couldn't have just put it in the pocket. They had no place to hide it. They take 4 more photos of now different fairies, which is really interesting because they had to have made new. I'm not saying they're fake, you guys. No. They had to have made new cutouts, right? They're like, oh, we need to perpetuate. So they can't just be the same images. We have to come up with new fairies. We have to make some new fairies. But when the plates were developed, they're like, oh my gosh, they were packed and sent back to Gardner, who sent an ecstatic telegram to Arthur Conan Doyle, who was then in Melbourne on a lecture tour. Doyle wrote back, my heart was gladdened When out here in far Australia, I had your note and the 3 wonderful pictures which are confirmatory of our published results. He's speaking about it like it's a scientific experiment. It just kills me. When our fairies are admitted, other psychic phenomena will find a more ready acceptance. We've had continued messages at seances for some time that a visible sign was coming through. I mean, he's hip deep in this for whatever reason.
It's this belief that magic is coming back into the world. That's kind of sweet.
It is. And I feel very conflicted because on the one hand, what the hell? But on the other, oh. Well, but my favorite thing here is that he says when our fairies are admitted. I'm like, you don't fucking own these fairies, bro. I understand you're a colonial Englishman, okay? But they're not your fairies. You're like fourth hand. You're the 7th person on this train and you're like, they're mine.
If fairies do exist, they sure as shit don't belong to you, okay? Get it together, Doyle.
Doyle's article in the December 1920 issue of The Strand had 2 high-resolution prints of the 1917 photographs. So for the girls by this point, they'd been doing this for 3 years.
That's a long con for little girls.
Yes, that's right. You wouldn't think they'd have the stamina, especially a 9-year-old. My God. That issue of the magazine sold out within days of publication. Everybody wanted it. So to protect the girls' anonymity, Frances and Elsie were called Alice and Iris, and the Wrights family name was changed to Carpenter. Doyle really hoped, it said, like, this is from Wikipedia, I think, Doyle hoped that if the photographs convinced the public of the existence of fairies, then they might more readily accept other psychic phenomena. So this I also find interesting. He's not really in it for the fairies. He's in it for spirits. Human spirits.
Yeah, it's a bigger thing for him.
Yes, he is also running a long con.
I just rolled my eyes at myself because I'm like, didn't you just differently summarize what Teresa just said?
No, that's this whole podcast. You summarize me, I summarize you. I talk over you. I pretend I invent things that you've said. Gardner made one more visit to Cottingley in August of 1921, so, 9 months after the article was published. And he brought cameras and plates again for Frances and Elsie, but he came with an occultist named Geoffrey Hodson. Neither of the girls claimed to see any fairies on that visit. There were no more photographs from them, because I think they're like, we really got to shut this down, because obviously the adults are not going to shut it down for us, so we need to take control of the situation. No, we are not taking any more pictures of fairies. But Hodson, the occultist, he was noting in his journal, he wrote and wrote and wrote during the whole visit, talking about all the fairies he saw on the property. And the girls, rolled their eyes and were like, this guy's a fake, because we're fakes. We know this is a total fucking lie, and here's this adult claim. Oh my God. Public interest after that sort of faded after 1921. Doyle wrote a book called The Coming of the Fairies in 1922, which also seems to be on brand for him because he's writing the book about it after no one cares anymore. And in that book, he described his beliefs about the nature and existence of fairies and spirits. He reproduced 5 of the Cottingley fairy photographs and said that those who suspected them of being faked were wrong. And he expressed his conviction that they were authentic. And I read his article. Didn't read the book, but I read the article in The Strand. And it sounds exactly like you imagine an article written by a colonial, white, older man would sound. I mean, it's, he has a style. That was it. Nobody contacted Elsie and Frances again for a good long while. They grew up, they got married, they lived abroad. Every 20 years or so, somebody would be like, hey, were they fake? And they sort of dodged the question or said no or whatever. But in 1983, the cousins admitted in an article published in the magazine The Unexplained.
They explained it in the magazine The Unexplained.
That's right. They said that the photographs had been faked. Duh. Although at that point, they still maintained that they'd actually seen fairies. They had just faked the photographs. And I find that interesting as well. Because even though they knew it was 100, they started the lie. And they knew they started the lie. But now, 60 years later, they can't say, yeah, we made it all up. Because somehow I'm imagining that would be sort of denying wonder, or denying something beautiful about the world they wish was true, right?
Yeah.
In this article in The Unexplained, they explained, as you said, that Elsie just copied illustrations of dancing girls from a popular children's book of the time and drew wings on them. That's all I did. If they had done a Google image search, they would have been like, no, this is from this book that was published 2 years ago.
Hey, why didn't they Google image search it?
The girls said they had then cut out cardboard figures, supported them with hat pins, and got rid of their props in the stream once the photographs had been taken. So their dad apparently didn't search very carefully. In a 1985 interview on Yorkshire television, there's a show called Arthur C. Clarke's World of Strange Powers. My God, this is amazing. We're going to do episode after episode on this stuff. I'm fascinated. On that show, Elsie said they were too embarrassed to admit the truth after fooling Arthur Conan Doyle. They're like, he created Sherlock Holmes and we fooled him. 2 village kids fooled a brilliant man like Arthur Conan Doyle. Well, we could only be quiet. We had no other choice. And in the same interview, Francis said, I never even thought of it being a fraud. It was just Elsie and I having a bit of fun. And I can't understand to this day why they were taken in. They wanted to be taken in.
Sometimes the imagination it takes to create a really compelling character and a full world is also the imagination that leads you to believe that fairies are real.
Mm-hmm. I thought his last name was hyphenated, but Conan's actually his middle name, so I'm just going to call him Doyle. Isn't that interesting? I thought it was Conan Doyle. It's not. That's his middle name. I just wanted to sort of really dive into him for a minute, because he also believed in the Piltdown Man. Do you know about the Piltdown Man?
No.
The Piltdown Man essentially is evidence of the missing link between apes and humans. There was this theory in paleontology archaeology that there was basically like, there were monkeys, and then there was something else, and then there were humans, and that's how it went. It wasn't like a gradual change over hundreds of millions of years, which we now know it was. They thought it was just like, ape, something else, us. And so the search for them was the search for that something else. And in 1912, I think he was an archaeologist. Yeah, he was an amateur archaeologist, and his name was Charles Dawson. He claimed to have discovered the missing link between ape and man. He found part of a human-looking skull, slightly human-looking, sort of human-looking, in a Pleistocene gravel bed near Piltdown Village in Sussex, England. He wrote to Arthur Smith Woodward, who is the keeper of geology at the Natural History Museum, about the find, and then he and Smith Woodward started working together, making further discoveries in the area. They found a set of teeth, a jawbone, more skull fragments, and primitive tools, which they suggested belonged to the same individual. Smith Woodward made a reconstruction of the skull fragments. Speaking of bones, via that bones magic where you look at a skull, but then someone who knows what they're looking at sees the face that would have been on it, they hypothesized that the find indicated evidence of a human ancestor living 500,000 years ago, and then they announced their discovery at a Geological Society meeting in 1912. And for the most part, the story was accepted in good faith. Great. Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
If the end of the story is that fairies actually constructed all this to fool everyone, I'm going to freak out.
I wish it was. You're writing a better story than I'm telling. So this discovery was in 1912, but we didn't have modern ways of dating artifacts are so advanced that between 1912 and 1949, I mean, so much happened that it was only 1949 when like new technology had come along that enabled them to date these artifacts that had been discovered at Piltdown.
Nowadays, they're like, okay, this guy died 700 years ago on a Tuesday at 2:00 in the afternoon.
And apparently his name was Lester, weirdly. Most of these articles are from the UK Natural History Museum and scientific publications that are very po-faced and aren't laughing at them. They're just saying new evidence has come to light, which is one of the reasons I like scientists, because they keep a straight face when I want to make fun of people.
Well, it's because they know that they are the fools of tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right.
The facts of today make the fools of tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're going to discover something else tomorrow that's going to make us look stupid. So be kind.
Dr. Kenneth Oakley at the Natural History Museum discovered that Piltdown remains were only 50,000 years old, using fluorine test apparently. So this eliminated the possibility of the Piltdown Man being the missing link between humans and apes.
How old?
50,000.
That's still pretty, I mean, I'm impressed.
And this is like the layman's interpretation. Oh, they're still pretty old though.
So they were real. They just weren't of the time they thought.
Just hang on. There's more to the story.
Okay.
But I like where your head's at. I like your inquiring mind, Claire. After that fluorine test revealed they were only 50,000 years old, other biological anthropologists did additional tests to check the age of the fragments. And their results showed that the skull and jaw fragments actually came from 2 different species.
Oh, well, that's not fact then.
Yeah, human and ape in the same jawbone and skull. And they said the ape was probably an orangutan. Scratches on the surface of the teeth, which were visible under a microscope, revealed that the teeth had been filed down to make them look human. They also discovered that most of the finds from the Piltdown site had been artificially stained to match the local gravel. In 1949, their conclusion is that Piltdown Man was an audacious fake and a sophisticated scientific fraud. Based on that research, an article was published in the Bulletin of the British Museum of Natural History, Volume 2, Number 3, 1953, if you guys want to look it up. It's available online. I love them. They put everything online. You can't actually download the text, but you can look at the actual pages of the journals. It's really cool.
Science is for sharing.
Science is for sharing, that's right. So, since the report some 40 years ago of the discovery of several cranial fragments, a portion of a mandible, and a canine tooth at Piltdown in Sussex, the problem of the Piltdown skull has been the subject of continuous, I'm sure they said controversy, not controversy. This article, the introduction is basically like, yeah, nah, this is a fake. I mean, but they do it in very nice scientific language. And then they go into a discussion of the wear patterns on teeth of various mammals and early hominids that is interesting, but outside the scope of our inquiry today. Since that article was published in 1953, scientists of various kinds have used the technology of the day, CT scans most recently, scanning electron microscopes, more and more precise ways of testing material to figure out exactly how this scam was perpetrated, essentially. So one research team found that it's pretty likely that a single orangutan specimen and at least 2 human specimens, possibly from the medieval period, were used to create the fake fossils.
It's interesting that they used some actually older bones.
They were like, we have to use bones. Where are we going to find them? Okay, we have older bones now. So, one theory is that he actually found medieval remains at the site, but had access, and this is Charles Dawson, by the way, who most people pin the fakery on. He had access to orangutan skeletons, and he's like, you know what I'm going to do today?
Don't worry, I have an orangutan guy.
CT scans revealed the teeth were filled with gravel from the Piltdown site. They're like pebbles in the molars. The whole collection that perpetrated this fraud were prepared in exactly the same way. Like the same modifications were made on the orangutan and human material. And all of this points to the central involvement of Charles Dawson, who is the only person known to be connected with the discoveries. There were 2 different sites, and they found fake stuff at 2 different sites. And they're like, this is highly unlikely. And now we know it has to be someone who had access to both. And that's him. Ding, ding, ding. Okay. Now, how does Conan Doyle fit into this? In December of 1912, sort of right after the discovery was made. Okay, this is the problem with using research, quote-unquote research from crazy people. Because I don't know if you guys have ever been to the Arthur Conan Doyle Encyclopedia, but it is managed by someone who does not speak English and who has emotional problems. It's my guess. My guess is. Because there are, random insertion of exclamation points in language and in timelines that are supposed to be very cut and dried, and suddenly Arthur Conan Doyle exonerated exclamation point is in there. So it's super interesting. There's a chronology of this because Conan Doyle lived at Crowborough, which was 7 miles from Piltdown. He played golf really close to the gravel pit where Dawson found the skull in the first place. He was an avid fossil collector, which you sort of know if you read The Lost World. He was an amateur paleontologist. After Charles Dawson publicized his discovery, Arthur Conan Doyle sent a congratulations letter to him and offered to drive him anywhere with his car. If you need to dig in any other gravel, let me know, and I will take you there.
He's like, don't worry, I'm 42, I have my driver's license.
This idea that Conan Doyle sort of helped perpetrate the fraud, it doesn't have any basis in reality. There's no evidence that he was involved at any point, except that he believed it and continued believing it. But as we know, he turns out to be kind of a credulous fool. So, I mean, fooling Arthur Conan Doyle should be a thing that, that's a good show. There's that Houdini and Doyle show, that's good, but fooling Arthur Conan Doyle is also a good show someone should make. We know that Arthur Conan Doyle and Harry Houdini were friends for a little bit. There's a show about it now. It turns out Phil Jupitus, who is a comedian I like very much, and some other comedian who I'm sure is very good, who I don't know, did an Edinburgh show about the relationship between Arthur Conan Doyle and Harry Houdini. There's a photo, or it's kind of a compilation. It's an article written about their friendship, and I have it here. I'm going to show you the 2 photos they used. So I want you to contrast and compare the photo of Houdini with the photo of Arthur Conan Doyle. Who do you think who's who, do you think?
I mean, Houdini's half naked, mostly naked, hunched over with chains around his arms and legs, and he's sort of doing a muscle man pose. It looks like the early Arnold Schwarzenegger photographs, like, ugh! And then Arthur Conan Doyle is there in his pith helmet and leg up on a rock, very posed and proper British gentleman.
I like how far Arthur Conan Doyle is cantilevered over in this photo.
He's at a 45-degree angle there almost.
He looks like he's singing I'm a Little Teapot. They were buddies for a while because they both sort of believed in the possibility that spirits exist after death and then could communicate with us. But Houdini did his escape tricks for Doyle and private audiences, apparently, and then explained how he did them. And Arthur Conan Doyle refused to believe that he wasn't actually magic.
Seriously?
Seriously. Arthur Conan Doyle was like, nah, you can say that to the others, but I know you really have magic powers. And Houdini's like, are you fucking kidding me? I don't know how this is relevant, but I think it's a useful way of thinking about it. Like, Harry Houdini was the child of immigrants. He had to work his ass off his entire life to have whatever he had. He developed these skills and his flexibility and the way he does these tricks. And he's telling this upper middle class and then eventually very wealthy Englishman, no, I'm not actually doing magic. Here's where I hide the bobby pin that undoes the lock. And the upper middle class Englishman will not believe him. He's like, no, you're magic. And finally Houdini was like, buddy, I'm sorry. I just can't. So Harry Houdini's mother died. And he went to see spiritualists to see if he could contact her because they were very close when she was alive. And the mediums that he went to see sort of like did automatic writing. And you said it was from her. And he's like, my mother spoke Hungarian. She could not speak English. And yet I'm getting pages and pages of this like perfectly grammatically correct English back from these mediums. Like, I just can't. And Doyle like refused to believe that it was not true. And so they were only friends for a little bit, and then Harry Houdini's like, buddy, I'm sorry. Best of luck to you.
I don't have time for this. My question is, was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle just really naive in that wealthy man way, or was he just exceptionally stubborn in that wealthy man way?
It's such an interesting question, isn't it? What is that? What is the personality that on the one hand creates Sherlock Holmes and on the other just will not be told that something isn't magic? I'm glad. I like the face you're making right now because that's the face I made as I was reading it. It makes me feel less alone in the world.
Whatever tendencies we have within our characters, we automatically have the opposite potential. So I'm wondering if Sherlock Holmes was a manifestation of his logic, of his higher brain function that just didn't get anywhere else to play in his life. These two things don't feel like they go together, but sometimes that means they really do.
Anyway, Arthur Conan Doyle is fascinating to me, and these are 3 of the many reasons why. And I am pleased to have shared these moments with you today. God, he just drives me insane. So I referenced articles from the National History Museum. This is all in the UK. So Natural History Museum, Piltdown Man Hoax Findings by Katie Pavid in 2016. Wikipedia, of course, for all of it. Quartz Magazine, The Cottingley Fairy Hoax of 1917 by Rosa Lister. ArtNet News had an article about the type of camera that they used and how it would or would not have been able to fake fairies with that camera. So I read that for you guys. Didn't include any of it here because, frankly, pretty boring. But I used it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Teresa.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody. Again, please like, comment, download, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Testing. Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com.